I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 38 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. This meeting is taking place, of course, in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Before we proceed, I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognise you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Please address all comments through the chair. Finally, a reminder that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and a motion adopted on January 20th, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of the North Atlantic right whale. We'll now go to opening remarks, but I would like to welcome our first panel of witnesses representing the New Brunswick Crab Processors Association. We have Gilles Theroux. Gilles Theroux, okay, sorry about that. Representing the Rassemblement des Pêcheurs et Pêcheuses des Côtes des Îles, we are joined by Charles Poirier, President, and Leona Renaud, Director. And appearing as an individual, we have Mr. Glenn Best, fish harvester, owner of Glen and Jerry Fisheries Incorporated, and I'm sure Mr. Best has presented before committee before. Thank you for taking the time to appear.
Monsieur le Président, appel au règlement, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais.
Mr. Chairman, would you advise the tests have been done for the audio for all members of the committee?
Been done before. I was said it was good to start.
Merci
just to let
beaucoup.
you know. Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking time to appear today. You will each have up to 5 minutes for an opening statement, and I invite Mr. Thériault to begin, please. 5 minutes or less.
Monsieur le Président, membres du comité.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, first I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you to discuss the current situation of the North Atlantic right whale as a species at risk. My name is Gilles Thériault. I'm the president of the New Brunswick Crab Processors Incorporated. And by the way, this year marks my 50th year of involvement in the development of Canadian Atlantic fisheries. Without being pretentious, I got to say it, I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt. That being said, I have to admit that the presence of the Atlantic right whale in the southern part of the Gulf in 2017 created such a stir here and elsewhere following the unfortunate incidents of deaths caused by entanglement in trap ropes and collisions from boats in our waterways. We have not yet recovered 6 years later. In today's calculation, that's a very long time for any crisis. No one was impacted and singled out like the snow crab industry, particularly in the United States, and of course, I'd venture to say elsewhere in the world. In an effort to protect the right whale, I witnessed, on behalf of the snow crab industry, to go from an initial reaction of nuisance to a deployment of energy that I've never seen before in my career to save an endangered species. This has been and continues to being done on new approaches in management planning and through innovative research and development of gear modification. All of this was done in a spirit of cohabitation. That is to say, to be able to continue fishing while putting in place exceptional management measures to protect the whale. The collaboration in this situation between the processors and the fisher folk is unprecedented. Processors through the Fisheries Improvement Program, the FIP, and we have a project, by the various fisher folk associations through the numerous experimental projects with fishing gear. In particular, that of a fishery using a buoy-on-demand technology. I've also observed throughout this case an excellent cooperation between processors, fishers, federal and provincial departments in order to set up annual fishing plans and to implement other important measures such as de-icing of our ports. This wasn't achieved without numerous long discussions, but always with the will and the intent to manage a fishery based on the cohabitation principle. In other words, ensure as much as possible the protection of the right whales and allow fishers to land their crab quotas as fully as possible. In my opinion, of course, the work is not yet finished and the battle has not yet been won. I must confess that I have great hopes for the eventual fishing using this method, buoy-on-demand technology, commonly called ropeless. I believe that the fishermen and their significant efforts to develop this fishing technique are way ahead of DFO, which has some catching up to do in the preparation of fishery management measures through this new technology. 18 fishermen used this technique this year and were able to fish in closed areas where whales were supposed to be present. And for the first time, a significant amount of crab using the new technology was commercialized. This is a huge breakthrough that is generating a lot of interest from all sides, and a first in that in the not too distant future could change all trap fishing in closed areas in order, of course, to protect endangered species such as the right whale. Our fishers are the pioneers of a revolutionary fishing method that I believe would one day be practiced worldwide. It is urgent that the DFO accompany the fishers in their approach to immediately implement management measures and scientific analyses that would avoid chaos at sea and accelerate the growth of this new technology in an orderly manner and as quickly as possible. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to a joint statement. I now invite Ms. Renaud and Mr. Poirier give their opening statement, please. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, good morning. Charles Poirier here on behalf of the Rassemblement des pêcheurs et pêcheuses des Côtes. I'm accompanied by Leona Renaud, our Director of Organization. Our organization is a non-profit organization created in 2015 by lobster fishermen, which today represents over 200 indoor fishermen, all fishery species combined from the Magdalen Islands. Our mission, the mission of our organization, our collective, is to promote and foster the advancement of the collective interests of inshore fishermen and fisherwomen on the coast. To unite the strengths of fisherfolk, both locally and nationally, and to develop partnerships and other common strategies with other associations in order to advance the common issues. The members of our Rassemblement believe that inshore fishing is today and tomorrow successfully be practiced while respecting the marine environment and is best suited to ensure the sustainability of the fishery while contributing to the local economy. Since its creation, our group of fishers for the Isles have been working on the implementation of several scientific projects allowing for the advancement of the fisheries, while taking into account climate changes that we are all currently experiencing and to preserve the marine resources. Our Rassemblement is involved in several committees and working groups, and today we'd like to share our concerns with the passage of right whales in the Gulf of St. Lawrence and the impact it has on our fishers. We've tabled a document, which I believe you've received, and I'm not going to read it, but I'd like to just perhaps offer you a few proposals and recommendations. We participated in a number of committees on fishing gear in order to reduce entanglement of the right whales in the Gulf. We've also had many discussions on the Île de Madeleine, the Madeleine Island fishers, how they might minimize this impact. It also applies, however, to all the fisheries that are fished by our fisher people. And it would be an illusion to think that these experiments tried out by us could work for everyone at all times. It is undeniable that the Medelino fishers will need more support to have gear that can handle at least 2,000 pounds of fish. These are concrete measures which we have experimented with and should be good for a number of years. It should be compatible with the right whale which is in presence in our areas. We would hope that you would you would modify the closing of seasons and fishing zones in our island area. I have a map in my brief which shows exactly where we're talking about. Furthermore, considering that this area, the Madeleine Islands, is part of the corridor for the passage of right whales, we also propose to contribute our ship, our fishing vessel, for surveillance measures on the passage of right whales, particularly in Zone 2, where most of our lobber fishermen fish. In Zone 22, a shallow area, we would offer you the boat and its captain to follow the whale until it leaves the zone. And if it's in F2 for more than 48 hours, we agree for a closure, temporary closure of this area. And we could be able to sequentially close and open these areas depending on where the whale is to be found. Now, if it stays relatively stable, static for two days, 48 hours, we should close that zone, but for no more than 48 hours. If it's there for 2 days or more, we would ask for a modification by DFO of these zones rather than lose 4 days from day one during a fishing season. Rapidly, I'll conclude. As you know, in the Madeleine Islands, we're in the middle of the Gulf, and all whales leaving through the Gulf will pass by our islands. We are 350 lobster fishers and another dozens for other fisheries. Our first concern, of course, is for the lobster fishery. If we close this for the Madeleine Islands, you might as well put a lock on the door. It's the number one primary economic driver for the islands. We can't live without the fishery. So we're trying to change this protocol of closures, dynamic or not. All whales traveling down the St. Lawrence Gulf will pass by our islands. We want to protect the species. We know that it's fairly rare to have them pass as close as we need to our fishing. We made some requests in 2021, rather, and we are taking the opportunity today to repeat our request and to share with you our brief. We thank those who invited us.
Cut you off there. We're going way over the 5-minute time limit. Hopefully anything else you had there will come out in rounds of questioning.
Merci beaucoup. Bye.
We'll now go to Mr. Best for 5 minutes or less, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for giving me the opportunity to present before the committee today. My brother and I are fourth-generation fishers that operate an 18 to 65-foot fishing vessels and employ 18 crew members. The crab fishery represents approximately 85% of our revenue, as the Newfoundland snow crab fishery had a landed value of $624 million in 2021. You can appreciate how important the crab fishery is to our fishing operators as well as rural communities in Newfoundland and Labrador as a whole. Without shellfish, rural communities will not resemble what they are today, but rather struggle to survive. I fished for 34 years operating out of FOPO on the northeast coast of Newfoundland, and I have to say every time I see a whale, and I've seen hundreds, it's still an amazing experience. I want to see our marine ecosystem thrive while doing the least harm possible. In those 34 years, I have never seen a right whale, let alone an entanglement. Only once have I ever heard of a whale entanglement of any species in crab gear. If you reference an interactive North Atlantic right whale map on the DFO website and select October 2015 to present, this map shows only 4 confirmed right whale sightings on the east and northeast coast in this time period. The clerk can forward you the link upon request. One of these sightings occurred in September, while 3 occurred in November. During these months, there is no crab or lobster fisheries taking place, and indeed very little fixed gear activity of any type. Still, with no impact on right whales in these areas, we are still mandated to use new safe whale ropes that are not proven effective, while places like Nunavut and British Columbia are exempt because they are deemed not to have whale entanglements. As harvesters, we have taken measures in the past to protect whales and satisfy the MMPA rules, including rope markings to identify area and fishery in case of entanglement, plus minimizing slack rope at the surface. I would have to ask, since these measures were introduced, have there been any evidence that these fisheries have entangled right whales from the east, northeast coast, or Labrador fisheries? In regards to whale-safe rope, you have to appreciate the environment we operate in. We need to impress upon DFO that a one-size-fits-all solution doesn't work for all fisheries and regions. In the Gulf, some harvesters operate single traps, which increases the density of vertical lines in the water. In Newfoundland, we use fleets of pots with about 70 pots per fleet, with 1 vertical line at each end, posing much less risk for these whales. During the limited consultation last winter, fishers were informed that a 1,700-pound weak link would be implemented in all fisheries. You have to appreciate that includes a lobster fishery in 2 fathoms of water, crab fishery in 200 fathoms, to turbot fishing on the edge of the continental shelf and depths down to 650 fathoms. Our vessels fish in very harsh conditions starting April 1st with crab early in the year to avoid mortality from soft shell as season progresses. With that early start comes challenging conditions from ice to heavy seas. It is not common to haul gear in 4 to 6 meter swells. Just picture a 65-foot vessel at 150 tons hauling up a fleet of crab pots from 1,200 feet of water full of snow crab in 4 to 6 meter swells. As the vessel rises onto swells, the 7,100-pound weak link will certainly break. The physics doesn't add up. Ropeless technology is far from proven or practical, so why are we trying to create a solution for a problem we don't have in our fishing areas in the first place? North Atlantic right whales have been in the media often with groups such as the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch advising people to avoid East Coast Canadian crab and lobster. This information is not correct and portrays that all crab and lobster fisheries in eastern Canada are harmful to right whales. The department instead should be prioritizing their work in areas where there is deemed to be a problem and focus their resources there, while educating environmental groups and promoting the positive side of the crab fisheries where there are not any entanglements. It is so easy to place blame on the fishing industry with gear seen on the whales tangible. How much research is done on other industries to see what the effects are? Noise from busy shipping lanes, pollution, seismic activity that emits huge underwater air blasts, all are concerns for fishers. Maybe you can understand why we feel unfairly targeted. In closing, I will say no fisherman wants or can afford to lose gear. We have taken measures in the past, including biodegradable twine and crab pots to allow escapement from ghost gear. With these regulations for implementing whale-safe rope, we are actually increasing the chance of more ghost gear and increasing the risk to marine ecosystem, the very opposite of the goal. The department is trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist in one area, but actually causing a much bigger one. The department must not forget that with all new rules and regulations, managing species that live in the ocean is critically important, but in turn, managing the people that work on it and earn their livelihoods from it must not be forgotten. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Best. That was dead on the mark for your time. We'll now begin the first round of questions. We'll first go to Mr. Small for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for taking part in this very important study, and a study which will have an effect on the social economic well-being of all affected. My first question is going to be to Monsieur Poirier. In which direction does the Gulf Stream flow? Does it bring water from the United States into your area? Monsieur
Le Gulf Stream,
Poirier.
savez-vous vraiment comment est-ce que peut situer le Golfe Saint-Laurent?
Well, the Madeline Islands are right in the middle of the Gulf. They're located right in the center. And the currents I've lost the signal here.
OK, m'entendez-vous?
Can you hear me now? The whales enter in the Cabot Hole and align themselves for the Gaspé Point, where they go to feed for the rest of the season. So they go directly in front of the Madeline Islands.
What I meant was the water, the water coming into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, does it not come up the eastern seaboard, the current direction? Does it bring water from the eastern seaboard of the U.S. into the Gulf of St. Lawrence? Just yes or no?
Oh mon Dieu, ça. Oh, mais ça, je suis pas assez.
Well, I'm afraid that on that question, I couldn't really say yes or no. I'm not sure at all.
I don't think the Labrador Current comes down through from Labrador that way. I think, from what I can find, I just wanted you to enlighten us on it, but would it be possible that dead whales could be coming up from the United States into your area with the current in the Gulf Stream and not, in fact, be dying where they're found, but dying south of the border?
Les baleines qui viennent
Once again, no signal. Well, I'm not sure how to answer that. I believe, though, is that they come up from the Gulf Stream from the United States. So they migrate in our direction, and then in November, December, they return journey to the States. That's, I can tell you for sure.
Thank you. To Mr. Best, if this ropeless technology comes in, how difficult will it be for you to avoid the gear of fellow fishers or even your own gear? When you're setting your gear, you could set on top of yourself or others. How would you find ropeless technology in your area?
Well, I would have to say from the limited consultation, I really don't have a lot of information that's been given or done that I know of on this coast. So, it's for me to say how it will work and the impacts that would have on us, I don't really know because we don't have the information. And that leads to the point like implementation in a short period of time is, I don't know how it can proceed. And in terms of gear conflict, we have lots of gear conflict, right? Gear conflict as it is when we have markings at the surface. So Nobody have told us how ropeless gear will work, how we will avoid another person's gear, how we'll even know that person's gear is there when we go there to fish. And sometimes you can get a high concentration of fishers in one area. So these are a lot of questions that I don't really know. I've thought about those, and it really concerns me. So, but I don't really have a definite answer for you. All I know is that there's so many unknowns.
Are you satisfied with the level of consultation that DFO has had with harvesters at this stage in this process?
I can say adamantly that no, we're not satisfied, as you heard probably from Mr. Sullivan, Keith Sullivan, his presentation a few days ago. I was part of. I think there was 2 Zoom meetings last year. I was in on 2, and I think there was probably 3. And of those, that's probably the limit of the consultation that was presented to us as fish harvesters. And all that was talked about was ideas of what we could do, some of the different technologies that could be tried and tested, but nothing concrete, nothing that would tell us that, we've got this technology straight now. We can go forward in January 1, 23 and confidently use this gear, and people retrieve their gear and not have a bunch of gear sitting at the bottom and have another environmental mess.
Mr. Best, previous witnesses stated that they had a goal to reduce risk of entanglement by 90%. But given the facts that you just outlined, what do you think the risk of entanglement would be for right whales in fixed gear fishery in 2J, 3K, and L, in your opinion?
Just to be clear, are you talking solely right whales?
Right whales, based on where the time of year they've been sighted.
I can say with confidence a 0% chance.
Thank you, Mr. Small. We'll now go to Mr. Cormier for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mes questions vont être...
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the... my first question is for Mr. Thériault. Congratulations on your 50 years in the industry. You're much too young to have had 50 years of experience, but we will grant you that. For my colleagues, the fisheries were owned by the indigenous nations of Siboktak and are familiar with your processing. You know the effort put in by fishermen and the industry over the last 5 years. I think it's been extraordinary. We both know that there's always room for improvement as to the flexibility of some of these measures and restrictions, how we could have a more normalized fishing in the years to come. Would it be possible, in your opinion, Mr. Thériault, to have a bit more flexibility as to these measures? The temporary and seasonal closures, as you've seen last year, the Gulf was all closed almost completely to fishing, even if you hadn't taken your quotas. Would it be possible to get more flexibility on these measures, ensuring that our export markets in the States in particular are not impacted? Well, that's a very important question, but a very sensitive question. We're always looking for ways to develop management plans of that resource so that we can catch our complete quotas safely, but also protect the whales. If we bring one change to the current plan, well, the current management plan doesn't assure in any way that there's going to be no entanglements. We'll never get a guarantee on that. We can't say 100% their whales will be protected unless we close the fisheries completely, as people from Monterey will tell you, would like to do. We're always looking for ways to exercise better fishing practices, all the while protecting the whale. The Government of Canada, and I understand full well, if we do it on an incident-based theory or management plan, and by happenstance, if a whale gets entangled or dies, the government is very, very reluctant to be too flexible, But on the other hand, I understand the fishers' point of view. They know the situation. They're on sea. They're there. It's not a selfish attitude. They're not trying to maximize here. I think the fisherman's argument is very reasonable. It's sensible, and I think that sooner or later you will have to be more flexible. Well, as you said, Mr. Taillot, I see this in my region too. They're talking about these ropeless traps, for example, and in my area, after 3 years of experimentation, it seems to be working fairly well. But in the Bay of Fundy and other areas, because of the currents, it's much more difficult and tricky to establish. We have the weak ropes also, the low resistance ropes, which are supposed to be in place for 2023. The various tests that have been conducted are totally inconclusive. If we want to save the whale and have fewer ropes in the water at any time, don't you think we should wait until we have some conclusive positive results from these tests before going forward with a technology which might be even more nefarious for the health and well-being of our whales and serve no purpose for the crab fishery? Well, as a good politician, I think you're trying to get me to reply in a certain... No, not at all. I want your honest, frank opinion. But I agree completely with you in any case, in this case. And I believe that these measures have not been proven. There's a matter of safety for the fishermen as well. And we have to ensure I don't see the ropeless technology as being the solution. I firmly believe that there should be no rope, actually. I believe in technology of buoys on demand. The buoys at the bottom, there's no rope. And when it's time to fish, you bring it up, you haul it up, you lower your trap. 18 fisher folk this year in my area have tried this experiment. I talked to the captains to see what their opposition. Some were completely against it. They didn't believe in it whatsoever. They said it was crazy. But they've become firm converts to the technology. No ropes in the water. But we haven't quite mastered the techniques involved, but that's the future compared to entanglements and everything else, even if it's supposed to be ropeless.
6 minutes
Merci.
are up. We'll now go to Madame Desbiens for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I usually share my time with Mr. Cormier, but this time I think I need it. It's Friday. What the heck? Okay, now I've earned my supper. I'd like to talk with Mr. Poirier because the area wherein we find the Madeleine Islands is very unique. The Madeleine Islands, the socioeconomic balance is directly linked to fishing, from what you've just said. And I've visited the islands several times, and that's the number one topic that everyone talks about, fishing. The life of the Madeleine Islands is motivated by fishing. So I'd like to hear you on the eventuality where the DFO decides to go ahead with their program for 2023, perhaps using methods that haven't been conclusively proven to be workable. What do you foresee in the short term for the next fishing season? What's going to be the impact for the fishermen and the economy of the islands? Well, 325 fisher folk here on Madeleine Island, and we are really crowded out there. It's one trap on top of another, almost, of the 325 in the smaller area into which we're constrained. And It's very, very, very busy out there. And the difference between two traps on the same line, there could be a difference of 20 feet. And one is 20 foot about the other one. So, and with any kind of active current, you're going to have trouble. If they're going to insist, well, they have to test these. Otherwise, our traps will stay in the water. It won't be whales that are going to be entangled. It'll be our traps that will be all entangled. I don't know if you can visualize that, but that's not at all acceptable. We're not. If we have to abandon them, if we have 2,600 traps, which is pretty expensive when you total it up, this is not at all of an attractive proposition, and it's not very logical that we should accept that. I've seen and discussed the results of these tests, and some of this rope it just breaks by itself. It's not the whale that is connected with the ropes. It's the weight of the catch. And I think at a certain point in time, if we abandon this to the bottom of the sea, we're going to create some ecological problems here. They may rot out in the course of a year, but I mean, they'll still be a danger for a year or so until they disintegrate. We don't necessarily want to replace 10 traps a day. This wouldn't be very profitable for the fisher of the Madeline Islands. Well, what do you think about putting it back to 2025 so we can prove the technology? Well, listen, I was listening to Mr. Thériault speak earlier, and the buoys on demand, for example, that's great. But he'd have to come to visit us at Ile de Madeleine here in the Madeline Islands. My neighbors, my fishers as well, and very often we find one is on top of another trap. It depends where your neighbor decides to go fishing, but we don't always know that. So what we have is one line with seven traps on it, one buoy. Well, thank you. The dynamic approach that you're proposing, if a whale is sighted in the area, in the passage, you're going to provide a vessel, and you will keep monitoring it. You're going to see what direction it's going in, its speed, its rate of progress. Is that going to make fishing safer for fishers and for whales? Will this allow you an option, a valid option to continue to protect the whales but continue fishing?
We're supposed to be able to see you as you're speaking.
Oui, mais c'est que je peux pas. Je pèse dessus puis ça marche pas. Vaut perdre du temps.
It's not working. I'm trying to turn it on, and I'm just wasting time trying to. But I can give voice to Léonard.
Find in again, so leave it as it is.
OK, garde. Là, pour revenir avec notre bateau, le PPC.
To come back to our ship, our boat, our vessel, DFO doesn't have a science vessel, and we, on offering this boat, you're not supposed to be tracking it at close distance, so we leave quite a distance. Now, when it goes close to the Madeline Islands, whales can be very stubborn. It can come in close to shore. It could be, and yet in 10 hours later, it'll be 60 miles away. It's not too complicated. As soon as we spot a whale, sight a whale, we call out, and 48 hours you close the fisheries. Now, you close one sector where there's no more whales. They've already moved on. We track the whale as soon as we sight one, and the ship's captain, will keep continuing to follow it so that it doesn't enter into one of the fishing zones. If it comes into the area, we are quite prepared to close the fishery temporarily. But as was explained earlier, we're in the dead center of the Gulf. All the whales pass by around the island. If you've seen 150 sightings, well, if there's 150 whales, you're going to get 150 sightings because they all pass. We're a corridor. We're a passageway. We don't have any more mackerel. We have no more herring. All we got left is crab and lobster. That's the only species that we fish right now. And they're not going to be eating lobster that often, for sure. But insofar as they're on their way, they're migrating, they have to migrate by our island. 2 years ago...
And Madame Debienne's 6 minutes. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses here today. First, I want to say a big congratulations to Monsieur Thériault, did I pronounce it correctly, Thériault, for 50 years in the fishing industry. That's quite the accomplishment, and I'm certain I have a lot that I can learn from you, so perhaps we can continue the conversation after. But I did have a question. You had spoken about processors, fishers, federal and provincial departments coming together to set up annual fishing plans, and just wanted to get some clarification. Was that, or maybe I missed something, but is that you coming together as well to talk about the whale safe gear, to talk about the North Atlantic right whale? Are there any discussions around that? I'm trying to understand if there's been consultation and conducted that you've seen around the particulars of how we move forward cohabitating with the North Atlantic right whale.
Yes, there's a fishing plan for every fisheries, right?
Yeah.
And it's a yearly fishing plan, and of course the Department of Fisheries and Oceans at the beginning of the season will say, here are the regulations, the same as last year. We are changing this or we're changing that. That happens on a regular basis. Since the arrival of the whales in 2017, the fishing plans and the regulations have changed substantially, and I would argue rightfully so, because of the presence of the right whales and because of the incidents where we had the entanglements and the mortalities. So what I'm saying is that I've witnessed a great effort in cooperation and collaboration to come up with the right plan, okay? And that is more significant than I was used to in terms over my years. I've never seen the industry, and I was saying the same thing with the processors and the fishermen. Quite often we can tend to butt head, but when it comes to the right whales, it's impressive to me how everybody is really working together. Not that we agree on everything as we are hearing today, but the effort that's being done by everybody to try to work it out is very, very impressive, and I think it has led to some improvement of this fishing plan from year to year. And we need to continue to have that exchange. And we need to hear from Mr. Poirier again and also from Mr. Best and others, right? We need to continue to do that. But we have made strides of progress, but we can't say, yeah, we have the right solution, now everything is fine. No, we need to keep on working and keep on making those changes.
Thank you. You had, because it's come up multiple times through this study already, I'm curious if you could just touch on, you'd mentioned some of your work that you were doing alongside First Nations, and I'm wondering how that plays into the consultation processes and the planning that you're seeing moving forward, and if there's been any pieces that you've seen with First Nations relating to the protection of the North Atlantic right whale, and of course ensuring that the livelihoods of fishers are also protected.
Yes, I have the honor and the privilege of working for a First Nation. I'm a consultant. I organize a fishermen's organization called the Maritime Fishermen's Union, and left that 35 years ago. I've been doing consulting ever since, And recently, I've been focusing my efforts on the integration of First Nations into the commercial fishery. I'm a strong, strong believer in the Marshall decision, and I'm a strong believer in truth and reconciliation. So it's very important. Okay? So therefore, I am also being quite involved in this community, the First Nation of Elsipogtog, which, by the way, I'm so proud of that we have now this community, most modern snow crab plant in Canada. We've just built a $25 million snow crab. We're making money, and profits are going back to the community to create jobs and so on. So it's a wonderful, and it's a collaboration because the plant is located in the Acadian community, so it's a great collaboration between the Acadians and the Mi'kmaq. And when you come and visit our plant, and we are all invited, you'll see a big sign, a collaboration between the Mi'kmaq and the Acadians. Regarding the snow crab, the Elsipogtog First Nation has its own snow crab quota, and we have 35 vessels fishing. It's very important to the community, very, very important. It brings in millions of dollars every year. And yes, we make sure that they are consulted. I would fight tooth and nail if they weren't. And the process is interesting because it's twofold. There is a separate consultation directly with the First Nations, but also they're also invited to partake in the broader forums of the advisory committees and so on. So to answer your question, they are quite active in this process, and of course very preoccupied by the whale situation, as we all are.
Thank you very much. How much time do I have left? 40 seconds. I can get one more in. Thank you very much, Chair. My last question is for Mr. Best. First of all, I want to just highlight that I'm also originally from Newfoundland, and so it's always nice to see fellow Newfoundlanders here, although I'm on the West Coast now, of course, and that's home. My question is this. I just took up my 40 seconds, didn't I? My question is this, that the Whale Safe Gear Adoption Fund, I'm wondering if you can speak to what your thoughts are on how we best move forward with this funding to ensure that we're moving in the right direction to have the gear in place that will help protect the North Atlantic right whale, while also ensuring that we're not losing gear out at sea like you'd spoken about.
Well, I don't really know how to answer that question because really there has been that much information passed on about the Whale Safe Fund. And going forward, I mean, the conditions that we fish under, if you're going to continue to operate under the fact that we have to have a 1,700-pound breaking strength, and the fact that we fish in depths of, like 650 fathoms, which is about 1,200 meters for some fisheries, I really can't get past the idea how it's going to be practical to use these whale-safe ropes in the conditions and the depths that we fish. I mean, it's what we fish on our coast is probably totally different than what you fish in the Gulf. I'm not familiar with the depths and that kind of thing in the Gulf, but I don't know how we can move forward under the criteria that's currently in place.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. You're gone a little bit over now on the other end. We'll give 5 minutes now to Mr. Bragdon, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Premièrement, je veux seulement dire à Mr. Thériault.
I'd like to tell Mr. Thériault, congratulations for your 50 years in the industry. That's really incredible. Quite an accomplishment.
It's really good to be here with you all today, and thank you to the witnesses who've shared. I've got some questions. We'll try and move through them as quickly as possible. I'll open it up. Maybe I'll start this first one to the 50-year gentleman, Mr. Thériault. How important is exporting your catch to the U.S. at this particular time? And if you weren't able to sell into that market, how could it impact your industry?
It would be devastating. The 90% of our production goes to the U.S. Many rural community would just disappear. It's that serious, right?
Absolutely.
The snow crab fishery has saved the fishery in Newfoundland, by the way, after the disaster with cod, and now it also is so important everywhere, including the Madeline Islands and including all the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So it is essential, and we have to take seriously what we're hearing from groups like the Monterey Aquarium. We just can't say, oh, this is fluff, right? These groups have very, very much influence in a lot of places among some big retailers, some wholesalers. So we need to make sure that our story is told, because we are doing much more than anybody in the world that I've seen, right? And I study these things in terms of trying to establish a method of cohabitation, assuring that we can earn our livelihoods and while protecting the right whale.
Just picking up on that, Mr. Terrio, thank you. I agree so much on that. As it relates to what you just said, it's so important that our story gets told, because we have some of the best practices in the world for fish harvesting and harvesting of lobster and snow crab. And we take great care of our waters, and there's no better protectors of our oceans than those who depend upon the oceans for their livelihood. I think it's a great story, and that story needs to be told, and the industry needs to be defended in this regard. How much consultation has taken place with the lobster and snow crab fishers and other fixed gear fishers as it relates to this? I'll start with you, Mr. Best, and then Mr. Poirier. Just as quick an answer as possible. I got a couple other questions I want to get in here. So, Mr. Best.
With regards to, are you talking about strictly consultation on the whale safe rope?
Yeah, exactly. And how much input did they provide you, or opportunity for input on this?
Well, like I said earlier, I mean, there was 3 Zoom meetings this winter, virtual meetings. That was pretty much the consultation process. And here in Newfoundland and on the East Coast, Northeast Coast, there hasn't been much consultation with harvesters. I know there has been some pushback from harvesters, but I mean, there is some work being done now. To what extent, I'm not quite sure, but we're not at a place where there's work done that we can safely say, well, we can move forward and have well-safe rope or ropeless gear. There's lots of questions that got to be answered in terms of ropeless gear. Like, you know, if you're in 200 fathoms or 600 fathoms of water, are you going to be able to use ropeless gear? So there's so many unanswered questions, and these things are not proven. So there hasn't been a lot of consultation.
So you'll say that basically the response from Fisheries and Oceans Canada and their decision-making process to your organization's input and others has been less than satisfactory, I would take it at this point.
That would be a correct statement. Yes, it's less than satisfactory. And it seems to me like now we're, you know, I know these measures have been talked about for a while. And it seems like now that, you know, we're at the midnight hour, and you know, the pressure's on to try to get these well-safe rope in place or ropeless gear, and it's just not realistic and practical to be able to do that at this point in time.
Excellent. And just following up on that, what is the impact of the dynamic and temporary fisheries closures on the time and fuel required to remove and set traps? So every time they shut this down because of a sighting or something like this, do you have an idea what the cost is? And does it put your harvesters at greater risk every time there is a closure as a result of a sighting and because of this new gear that's being experimented with? Can you comment on that, Mr. Best?
Well, as I said in my opening remarks, if you look at the interactive right whale map, I mean, from 2015 to present day, there's been 4 sightings of right whales on the east and northeast coast, and those are when there's very little fixed gear and absolutely no crab or lobster fisheries in place. So we haven't had issues with right whales. Like I said, the chances of me getting right whales is practically 0. So we don't have right whales. We haven't had closures. We don't face the same issues as they have in the Gulf when they got a concentration of right whales and they have close fishing areas. And, you know, we're lucky that we don't have that problem. Whether it will come someday, I don't know, with a change in the environment. But right now, we don't have closures. We don't have those problems. So it begs the question, you know, like, why are we trying to fix a problem on the east and northeast coast when we don't have one?
Thank you, Mr. Best. You want to comment on that, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Bragdon. Thank you, Mr. Bragdon. You're going way over.
Okay.
We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey, please, for 5 minutes or less, and I stress the less.
Thank you, Chair. He subbed on a committee I chaired, and he told me he would settle it here. Teasing. Mr. Theriault, good to see you. You've been a visionary in the East Coast fishing industry for years, and a lot of times your ideology was not always appreciated by the fishers themselves. This committee has heard extensively, and the common themes is everybody wants to protect the whale. everybody is aware of the consequences if we go back to a year like 2017 or even close to it. And you used the own phrasing, devastating, to the marketplace. We also has become clear that one size will not fit all as the approach. The other common theme is where fishers and whales interact, then something must give. And not all the Gulf is where fishers and whales interact. So my question goes to a statement you made in your opening comments, or maybe into an answer. You referenced something with DFO must accompany fishers on the road as we develop this new technology. So could you expand on that a bit more? How DFO must accompany fishers on the journey?
Yes, absolutely. It's a very important point that I was trying to make in my remarks. First of all, I want to be clear that situation in Newfoundland is totally different, and there's no whales there. So let's not And I totally agree with the preoccupations of putting in regulations that impact areas where there's no whale. Now, when I talk about ropeless, I'm talking about a fishery that is happening in the closed areas. I'm not recommending or suggesting that we have ropeless everywhere. But in those areas, and at one point, it's almost half of our fishing grounds or more, right? So if you could continue to fish and protect the whales, and I'm convinced that this methodology, this technique of having no ropes in the water when in a closed area, but still being allowed to put traps in there, would be fantastic. And it's happening right now. My point was 18 fishermen did it this year, and they were very successful. Some were able to capture their quota because they were allowed to fish in those closed areas. So they actually fished in closed areas. And what I'm saying right now we got a plan for this, right? There needs to be regulation in terms of how close to each other, how many traps per boat, are all the fishermen going to be allowed, and that we need to make sure that the fishermen are moving very fastly. This is creating a lot of excitement. As I said, they didn't believe it at all. Now it's the way of the future. So we need to make sure that we have the proper regulation in place for fishing with this technology in those closed areas. And my sense is the department is lagging behind right now in this area.
So to be clear, so it's the area of regulating the fishery as it would relate to using ropeless technology.
Exactly.
Am I correct in that? Okay, thank you. Another point that was made, and I would appreciate your opinion. We've heard a wide range of opinion, and one thing that became clear as well is that Canada, and a lot of times the department is criticized a lot, and I can be one of the critics of it as well, but that the consensus, a lot of consensus was that DFO acted in a reasonable way following 2017 when we were hit with the high numbers of whales in moving to protect the whales and also to protect Canada's reputation in the international marketplace. Is that a fair assessment from your perspective?
It is. It is from my perspective. This was really a bomb, right? A bomb. And we had to, as a country, we had to react quickly and was uncharted territories. So I think I'm not criticizing the government. The government and the department has been doing a tremendous amount of work as far as I'm concerned. We're still feeling our way through this, right? And it doesn't mean that they're right all the time, but I am not criticizing the attempts the government of Canada has made to try to address the issue. On the contrary, I applaud it, okay? Having said that, we need to further our work, and we need to perfection it, and we need to make sure that we continue to do this. I know, for example, on the question of the Sea-Watch Monterey Aquarium recommending that Americans stop buying snow crab and lobsters. How ridiculous is that, right? The government took a pretty good stand. I think I thought it was okay, but we need to be able to do more on that level. We as processors were quite involved, and I didn't get a chance to talk about this, but I'm really impressed with our fisheries improvement program that we have, because we were certified as an industry MSC, Marine Stewardship Council, and because of the whale entanglement, our MSC was taken away from us, right? And a lot of our buyers were saying, oh, you're not certified MSC anymore? I'm not sure that we can buy your product. So this is what's happening. Now we're taking the steps by including the fishermen, by working with government, by working with NGOs, including the New England Aquarium, by working with our buyers. We've created this group, right, called on this project called the Fisheries Improvement Project, so that we can return to our MSC certification. So this is tremendous coordination. So I'm not knocking anybody. I'm just saying, okay, this is evolving very fast. DFO, we need to do more to make sure that you're in sync with how fast this is going in terms of ropeless technology.
Thank you, and I'll let Mr. Morrissey know. I'll let him go a little bit over, actually, even though he didn't recognise me at the former committee as he mentioned it. I want to say thank you to our witnesses for appearing here today and sharing their knowledge. We'll take a couple of minute recess as we get ready for the second panel. So again, thank you for your input and your knowledge that you've shared with us here today. Suspended. Our second panel of witnesses, representing the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, we have with us Mark Mez, Director General, Fleet and Maritime Services, Canadian Coast Guard. We have Robert White, Director General, Vessel Procurement, Canadian Coast Guard. And of course, we have on virtual Mr. Nabah, Director General, Marine Construction Sector. We'll now go, I believe it's only Mr. Mace is going to give a statement. 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Mark Mess, and I am the Director General of Fleet and Maritime Services at the Canadian Coast Guard. I am accompanied today by Mr. Rob White, our Director General of Vessel Procurement, and by Nicholas Naba, Director General of Major Marine Construction at PSPC. I am speaking to you today from the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabes people. My role at the Canadian Coast Guard is to ensure the delivery of fleet services in support of Coast Guard and government programs, and to ensure the provision of services to mariners that ensure their safety and promote efficient movement of marine trade. My two colleagues are responsible for renewing the Canadian Coast Guard fleet through the National Shipbuilding Strategy. The Canadian Coast Guard is pleased to be here today to speak about our efforts to support and protect North Atlantic right whales. En tant qu'un organisme chargé d'assurer la sécurité des marins que le secteur maritime.
As the organization established and mandated to protect the safety of sailors, the marine environment and the right whale, we're working in close collaboration with our colleagues from the DFO, which hopes to maintain renewable fisheries and healthy marine environments.
Water platforms so that key activities such as science at sea and conservation and protection can be effectively delivered through Canada's largest fleet. Our fleet of over 120 vessels, including icebreakers, science vessels, buoy tenders, and search and rescue vessels, to name a few, are mission ready 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our fleet is the core component for the delivery of Coast Guard programs. We are working to strengthen and renew it thanks to the National Shipbuilding Strategy. At the core of our current fleet is our icebreakers. Up to 19 icebreakers operate each winter to make sure that marine traffic moves safely through ice-infested waters. These same icebreakers also facilitate access to open waters in the spring so that fisheries, such as the snow crab fisheries in Quebec and the Gulf regions, can be opened as early as possible while not compromising the life of mariners. The criticality of these icebreakers cannot be understated. The Canadian Coast Guard works extremely closely with all our stakeholders to meet their expectations during the winter period and in the challenging shoulder seasons. That is when there is still ice in multiple areas, but at the same time, the ice has cleared in other areas and marine navigation buoys need to be placed to ensure safe navigation. All the while, the fishing industry is eager to start their season. From a fleet assets point of view, the shoulder seasons are one of the most challenging times of the year where Coast Guard icebreakers are in high demand and where, unfortunately, sometimes demand outstrip our capacity, and difficult decisions must be made to prioritize services. We have also started to make use of third-party vessels, or what we call spot charters, through established standing offer contracts that allow us to draw down on these services if and when required. This allows us to supplement our fleet when demand exceeds our capacity. As we accept our new fleet, I am pleased to report that the Canadian Coast Guard will be better placed and prepared to support the difficult shoulder seasons and to support growing stakeholder needs more broadly. This is thanks to a new class of icebreaker we are currently designing, called the Mid-Shore Multi-Mission Ships. These smaller icebreakers will enable us to operate more effectively in shallower waters. Before I close, I would also like to inform this committee of the significant contribution that the Canadian Coast Guard also makes to support whale-related information sharing with mariners. The Coast Guard has created a mammal desk, one of which is at Les Esquimaux at the Marine Communications Traffic Service Centre. This serves as a critical resource to provide mariners with key information such as whale location, navigation warnings, temporary speed restrictions and shipping lanes, area closures, and other relevant information. Nous travaillons en collaboration avec Transport Canada.
We work closely with Transport Canada, who, as the regulatory agency, ensures compliance with these navigational restrictions on vessels in order to protect the North Atlantic right whales from collision with vessels in the Gulf of the St. Lawrence.
I have conveyed to you how we are working closely with our clients and partners, including our DFO colleagues, on important matters such as protecting the North Atlantic right whales and the key role of our icebreakers in supporting them. The Canadian Coast Guard is working to ensure our future fleet will be better placed to meet the expanding needs of our partners and clients, and we are prepared to ensure that our services continue until the new fleet arrives. On this, I will end my remarks, Mr. Chair, and we will be pleased to answer any of your questions.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to Mr. Small for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. Thanks for coming to this very important study. Okay, so my first question to you is, does the Gulf Stream take water from the eastern seaboard into the Gulf of St. Lawrence?
You're asking a question that, unfortunately, I am not able to answer. That is more from a science perspective. I don't know necessarily where that water would come from. I would suspect that the Atlantic water, of course, into the Gulf and into the river, but that's as far as I know from a scientific perspective. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I'm just wondering in which direction the Gulf Stream flowed, and if, in fact, some dead whales could be brought into that area from the eastern seaboard, in fact, and the eddies that circulate inside that part of the Gulf could be a catch basin for debris and dead whales. What do you think?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I just can't answer that question.
Okay, no problem. On to my next question. Given that we've got restricted speeds in some of these areas, are vessels allowed to travel at night and in restricted visibility?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Vessels are allowed to traffic at night in these restricted areas. There is no prevention. What they are restricted to do is related to speed. So when there are whales that are identified, the restrictions are put in place, are monitored by Transport Canada, and any vessel that goes outside of that speed for any more than 95 seconds is automatically notified, a contravention is issued, and sent to Transport Canada for follow-up as the regulatory body that is responsible for that.
Okay. So what's the vessel length? What's the vessel length in the United States that's restricted by speed versus Canada?
All vessels are restricted by speed in Canada in those restricted areas, whether it be a search and rescue boat, unless it's on a search and rescue call, of course, or a large tanker, but all vessels are restricted. And that information is issued to mariners through navigational warnings, notice to mariners, and postings that go through our Marine Communications and Traffic Services Center at Les Escumets, through continuous broadcasting messages to the mariners, informing them of these restrictions in these specific areas.
Okay, so we heard witnesses earlier in this study say that Canada has done more in the last 5 years than the United States has done in the last 25 years in the endeavor to protect right whales. And what I found is that our length restriction on vessels that would be restricted in, our minimum length vessel that would be restricted in speed in those areas is 42.64 feet. In the United States, it's 65 feet. Now that's what I found.
Yeah, I can't speak to, Mr. Chair, the difference between the Canada-U.S. and some of the actions that they're taking on behalf of, the protection of whales. I can say that the actions that Canada has taken are significant and had made a significant difference over the last number of years in, number one, making mariners and shipping and industry that much more aware of these restrictions as we move forward.
So how many vessels did the Coast Guard intercept last year that were breaking the speed limit? in restricted areas.
Yeah, Coast Guard doesn't intercept. Coast Guard identifies and monitors vessels. If a vessel goes over the restriction of 10 knots, then it would then issue the contravention, notify the vessel, and pass that information to Transport Canada as a regulatory agency to follow up. There is potential administrative monetary penalties that Transport Canada and their enforcement officers would then apply. So what we do is we communicate with the mariners, and then we then move forward and pass that information along.
Minute and a half left. Woohoo! How would you describe the vessel density south of the border? We'll say in the eastern seaboard, traffic density as compared to what we've got in the, I guess, in the more areas that are more concerned in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. How would you describe it?
I think traffic density on the eastern seaboard and, within the Gulf and the St. Lawrence are significant, whether it's, above the border or below. I mean, these are key areas where ships will be going, whether it's into New York or Boston or Philadelphia or any of the major ports along the eastern seaboard. But as you know, there's also significant traffic that comes down into St. Lawrence. It is the largest pathway into central Canada, and as a matter of fact, it's been identified as the Great Lakes, and that region has been identified as the 5th largest GDP in all of the world, both Canada and U.S., because of course vessels go down and will go to Detroit or Michigan or whatever, or up to Canada.
Time to get one quick one in. What's the percentage of vessels, if you look at the total combined violators of the speed criteria, commercial fishers versus non-commercial fishers that have been found violating thus far?
Yeah, I wouldn't have that information specifically, Chair, but that's something that I could have a look and see if we could break that down based on the number of contraventions we've had in the last couple of years.
I'd like to have that submitted in a written form.
Thank you, Mr. Small.
Thank you.
I think that part of it is answered. It will be provided if it's available. We'll now go to Mr. Cormier for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses, Mr. Mess. Thank you for the efforts that you're making, of course, in opening up our waterways over the last few years. I take a look at what's happening in the Bay of Caraquet and a little bit further upriver. As you know, we were pretty locked in for a while. We have problems every year to get to clear open these channels, I should say, so that our fishers could have access to open water, and that we don't have any problems with entanglements of with whales, for example. I have a few questions. What's the process, Mr. Mess, to ensure that your spot charters, as you mentioned them, we've had some visits of such in our neighborhood the last few years. What do you do to control the various contracts to these spot charters?
For the question. Mr. Chair, we use a bit of a tiered approach. The first thing is we always assign a light icebreaker to Shippagan and Caraquet in New Brunswick, of course, Acadian Peninsula, which is one of those areas that the fishermen want to get out sooner rather than later. Completely understand that. The light icebreaker will, of course, break ice, but it is restricted, of course, by its size and its draft, and will only be able to do a portion of that. So then we cascade another resource. So we'll bring in the spot charter, where we bring in a small tug that will be able to get into some of those other areas that the light icebreaker can't get into. But it, too, is restricted by the fact that it can only break up to 40 centimeters of ice. So then we also then bring in what we call is the ambidex machine, which is basically an excavator with claws on it that floats on ice and that is able to then break out additional ice where the other two assets can't get to open up the lanes, the shipping lanes for the fishing vessels to get out that have already been opened up by the light icebreaker and by the tugs that come in. Last resort, of course, is to bring in our air cushion vehicle, our hovercraft. And the hovercraft, of course, it will come in and then further break any ice. But we have to balance the need of the hovercraft with regard to its priority in the Restigouche River area, which of course is a priority because if we don't break ice there, we then have flooding into personal properties. But once we can get that, then the hovercraft will come in. So it is very much a cascading approach. And because of the ice breaking over the last couple of years, we are basically averaging opening up the fishing harbors about a week earlier than we normally have if we didn't have this cascading process of assets.
OK, merci. Et puis, écoutez, je vous suis très bien.
Well, thank you. I was following that quite closely, and I think it's very important to note that the icebreakers can't really get into these smaller channels at Caraquet. That's why you're using third-party or spot charters. And unfortunately, I'm going in inches, of course, but 16 inches, as we saw this year, the tug couldn't get in a few weeks in advance. But, okay, so at that stage, you were talking about some new icebreakers. You were awaiting this new vessel. Would it be possible to come into shallow waters, such as the channels that we have to navigate through? Do you have a date, a target date for getting these vessels? And when will you be able to put them into action? Will they be able to reach us at Caraquet and Chipigan?
Chair, I'll pass that over to my colleague, Mr. White, who is probably better placed than I to talk about what the timelines are of the arrival of the new midshore multi-mission vessels with the shallower draft that hopefully will be able to help us in these areas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are currently in the design stage for the midshore multi-mission vessel, looking at the requirements with my colleague, Mr. Mess. We're at the design stage right now. We have gone out with a request for information, I guess it was last year into the beginning of this year, for industry input. This vessel will be approximately 700 to 900 tons, somewhere in there, so a fairly small vessel. And that vessel will be capable, we're hoping, of breaking 40 or more centimeters of ice with its ice-breaking hull, and doing so in a shallow draft. We're not.
So we're taking about, I don't want to cut you off, but we're taking about how much time before we see this vessel built and in operation?
We will be going out during the year 23-24 for design, and then following that, which will hopefully take a year, we'll be seeing a build contract issued, and we'll be seeing those in the late 2020s.
Sorry, late 2020s, you said?
Be delivered. The speed of delivery will depend on the shipyard that's chosen. It won't be one of the three big shipyards under the National Shipbuilding Strategy. It will be a small shipbuilder, as was the intent of the National Shipbuilding Strategy for things that are for ships that are less than 1,000 tons.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier.
Thank you.
Dead on your 6 minutes. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. It's always agreeable to have people from the Coast Guard appear. And I'll take 30 seconds to say thank you. Thank you. My first navigational experience, I was on the Montcalm, which got me between my location and my destination, which was home to my parents. And we would have loved to have a great service like that available to us all the time. My father was a captain on the ferry at the time, and he used to come in from Montreal, and they were having problems with the clutch. So they said, well, he contacted the Coast Guard, and you came to our rescue. One of the other witnesses, please. Were you called on to intervene? How often? In Zone 22, which is along the coast of Madeline Islands, when there is passage of whales. Can you tell us what's the frequency or of these types of incidences?
Mr. Chair, the frequency of whales is very much dependent upon, where these mammals feed as well. Sometimes they are along the coast of the Madeline Islands. Other times they are further up the coast or further into the Gulf. I can't give you any specifics with regards to, what is the percentage of time it is along the Madeline Islands. I can tell you that through the monitoring, each of the respective zones, the restricted zones, once they're monitored, can be open and closed depending upon whether or not any of the whales are sighted. So that's as soon as whales are sighted through aerial surveillance as well as any other monitoring, then those areas are then closed, whether it's one whale or 5 whales. It doesn't matter. If a whale is in that area, it's then closed and restricted until no whales can be seen.
Est-ce que pour vous, c'est quelque chose de...
Well, would it be possible that a group of fisher folks would perhaps man or crew a scientific missioned ship to track a whale and perhaps assist with the information, so tell you it's out of the zone, if they are observing this, they're tracking it. It's only going through. It's not going to stop. It's not a feeding area for these whales, so they're just going to be traveling through.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, absolutely. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans works on tracking these whales. It's their area of expertise. They track the whales. They identify when there is a whale that is in danger or is entangled, for instance. It's Department of Fisheries then that track that whale and are able to hopefully be able to untangle it, for instance, if it's caught in any sort of nets. But it is the Department of Fisheries and my colleagues that work very much on tracking that. The responsibility of the Coast Guard is really to monitor and to identify any vessels that potentially could be, contravening the restrictions in that zone, but also always communicating with the mariners, informing them of any changes of restrictions in the zones as well.
J'ai encore du temps, peut-être pas. 2 minutes, c'est vrai? Mon Dieu, ça va bien.
2 minutes left. Good. So your mission essentially is to observe, monitor any non-conforming activity, illicit activity, and also you have a mandate to monitor. If you see a whale, you transmit that information. But I'm talking about a civilian group of fisher folk who have dedicated one ship to track whales, to follow them, to see it's going. Don't you think that might be a bit of an advantage to get that extra information for the closing and opening of these fishing zones?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. I think Department of Fisheries and my fishery colleagues would very much like any information with regards to where whales are, or, for instance, where they are going to. It's first of all difficult to monitor any sort of mammal, and so any sort of assistance that the public or fisheries might be able to give to the Department of Fisheries, they're probably the best people to go to help coordinate those kind of efforts. Now, we don't want 1 million boats on the water, but at the same time, these kind of efforts, I think will help us in identifying where these vessels are. And if I could just respond to, the committee members' comments, communication is critical for us. And communicating with our mariners, issuing the notification, the continuous broadcasting to all of the ships and vessels. There are call-in points, whether they are coming into that region and have been cleared by Transport Canada and the Coast Guard, or whether they are leaving with a full cargo. There are call-in points points where they have to get this information, and through the continuous broadcasting are always informed of any sort of restrictions, any sort of news of whales, so that they can at least reduce their speeds in those areas.
Thank you, Madame Devienne. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less.
Not very good at the or less part, but I'll try.
I noticed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. I'm very interested in the work that you're doing, such important work. I have to admit, I'd love to come out on the water and see the day-to-day of the work that you're doing. You'd spoken about, in your opening statement, about the challenges and the shoulders of the seasons and how sometimes there just aren't enough vessels to go around. I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit on what happens when there aren't enough aren't enough vessels, and what impact it has on the local fishers and communities and so on to continue on with their work.
Yeah, thank you very much. So there is a level of service that we have for ice breaking. We meet with industry to identify the levels of service and also prioritize and understand the prioritization of ice breaking services. So first and foremost, the first priority is any sort of distress or emergency situation takes precedence. That also includes ice jams because of the significant impact it can have to the economy and to those that live ashore. The second priority is a service request from the ferry service in accordance with the terms of the union will be given priority. And what I'm talking about here, of course, is the Marine Atlantic ferry from Sydney to Blanc-Saint-Blanc. That, of course, because in the terms of the union, also gets a priority. Then ships with vulnerable cargo. Anything that's claiming that has potential for pollution, dangerous goods, perishable goods, or vessels that are vital for the survival of a community. It has to be resupplied. Then it becomes marine traffic, fishing vessels, commercial ports, and fishing harbor breakouts. So these priorities are agreed to with the fishing industry, as well as the levels of service in Coast Guard's ability to respond. Sometimes, because if a vessel breaks down, for instance, and we have to move things around, we have to reprioritize maybe a tasking to a higher priority based on what has been agreed with industry. But then also the levels of service, the ice conditions, and the traffic density also dictate how that goes.
And how about capacity of people? I know we have the vessels, but of course we need the people to work on the vessels. Are you seeing any shortages of that?
It's been a long 2.5 years with COVID. But I'll be very honest with you. If we look at, for instance, all the icebreakers in the Arctic this season, we are able to man them all. And so right now we have sufficient crew to man our vessels on the east, west, or anything that goes up into the Arctic. We have COVID and we manage with COVID. We also then, of course, have to manage with the global industry's demand and need for engineers and specific expertise. And that's the reason that we focus so much in on the college. And we'll be having some very large graduating classes next couple of years that's going to really help us in identifying and filling some of these spots that we need, but also to be able to replace those that are retiring in the coming years.
Thank you. I ask all these questions because they're so interconnected with our capacity to respond and protect the North Atlantic right whale, and of course ensure livelihoods are in fisheries are maintained. I had a quick question. We had talked about I believe you'd called the midshore vessels that were being constructed, and you had talked about the shipyards that they were being built in. Do we know if these shipyards are in Canada or elsewhere, or where they're going to be built?
Yes, they will be in Canada under the Build in Canada policy. All of the ships the Coast Guard builds will be built at Canadian shipyards, and we know for the midshore multi-mission vessels, which will not be built at the big yards, which are doing the big ships, that we have strong interest among a number of players to ensure a competitive environment for those ships being built.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. And so could you clarify when a whale, say a North Atlantic right whale, is tangled or in distress, what would happen in your role? What's that process look like from the moment that a call comes out?
So if a call comes out, first of all, we will be issuing, a navigational warning to to mariners, saying that there is a whale in distress, hopefully tracking that whale and updating that notification to mariners as we move forward. The Department of Fisheries, of course, gets very much involved and are looking at ways, working with industry and their experts on hopefully unentangling the whales from the gear that they have been caught up with. And I know over the last couple of years we've been successful in removing some gears from whales, or the department has, in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. And my last question, I think I might have just enough time. Have you been seeing an increase of ghost gear out on the waters by chance in the last few years?
You know, that's a really good question, Chair. You know, there is ghost gear. You know, we're seeing it, you know, but I don't know whether or not it's any more or any less than what we've normally seen. You know, unfortunately, that ghost gear also gets caught up in some of our gear. And some of our props. So these are things that we have to be somewhat, you know, aware of. But yeah, it is out there.
Mm.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. You saved me 15 seconds. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold, who'll probably use that 15 on top of his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the time. And thank you for to the Coast Guard for the work that you do in keeping mariners and harvesters safe. We all appreciate it very much. Mr. Bess, I believe in your opening comments you mentioned that your vessels are mission ready 24/7. Is that an actual goal, or is that an aspiration, or is it actuality?
You know, it is an actuality, Chair. Our vessels are 24/7. You know, they're out 28 days. Some of our vessels are out 28 days straight. They come back, they change crew, and go right back out again.
I would beg to differ, having visited a vessel this summer, and it was in dock because of engine problems, not able to place buoys. So could you provide the committee with a list of all Canada Coast Guard vessels by vessel type and vessel readiness over the past 5 years, so that we can identify how many were disabled for mechanical or other reasons?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not just vessels that, for instance, you know, have been disabled. Others have vessel life extensions. Others have planned maintenance. Vessels have to have planned maintenance. We do that every year on every single vessel. They have a period of time during the year to maintain these vessels. Otherwise, we will not have a fleet in the coming years. That is very, very organized through the fleet operational plan, specific times for every single vessel to go through its maintenance. That doesn't mean that we don't have breakdowns.
Thank you. That would be, I think, beneficial for the committee.
Yes.
On another topic now, does the Canada Coast Guard contact or communicate with the U.S. Coast Guard to discuss and compare enforcement of right whale measures on both sides of the border? And does the Canada Coast Guard receive notification from U.S. authorities when the U.S. is doing surveillance overflights of right whales in the Gulf of St. Lawrence?
Thank you. The relationship with the U.S. Coast Guard is a very long-standing relationship. There is a summit that happens every year between Canada, U.S., and the Commandant and the Commissioner. There is engagements at all levels, including operational levels, where it's search and rescue, environmental response. Specifics to the right whales, and I think that was your question. The question, Chair. I suspect, and I will get back to this committee or come back to this committee with regards to the sharing of information on surveillance overflights, whether it's shared both on the Canada and U.S. borders, but that's information I don't necessarily have at this moment.
Thank you. I would appreciate if you can share that with us, that information and what information is communicated, especially when it comes to the U.S. doing overflights in Canadian waters. Mm-hmm. In regards to the enforcement, some of our other colleagues, or my other colleagues here, have mentioned the enforcement of mandatory speed restrictions and so on. Those infractions, they're monitored through an electronic vessel monitoring system. We've heard in other parts of the world where vessels will simply turn off their transponders, I believe it is, their transmitters, and go dark. How much confidence do you have that you're able to monitor these vessels appropriately should they choose to go dark and disappear off the electronic system?
You know, I don't think it's as high as people think with regards to dark vessels in this area. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but those are really for nefarious, things that they are going to do. But I suspect that if we have vessels that are transiting from a trade perspective, from a commerce perspective, from a pleasure perspective, they're not going to necessarily turn off their AIS. We also monitor through satellite. It's not just AIS. We can track vessels through various means, transponder, AIS transponders, we have satellite, we have other means that we're able to track, as well as regular check-in points from radio contacts that we have a sense of where that vessel is. Within our Marine Communication Traffic Services Centers, they also have predictability with regards to where those vessels may end up. So all of this is in the process to at least try to manage the vessel traffic in the area.
I'd like to get one more quick question in before the time runs out. We've heard a lot today about tracking vessels, and you've mentioned you have a whale desk set up to provide information to mariners as to the location of vessels. What work has the Coast Guard done with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans on actually tracking whales through transmitters or satellite transponders, anything like that?
It's a very good question. I don't. If the Marine Communication and Traffic Services Centers are linked in with the DFO Science, and it's again something, Chair, that I will just have to get back to this committee on, with regards to whether or not they are engaged in sharing that kind of information. Then I can at least have you know. But from an active perspective, we have what we call observe, record, and report of any of our Coast Guard vessels. That information on any sort of whale or mammal sightings automatically goes into our regional operations centers. That's then disseminated. So that's also included in any sort of maritime domain awareness, particularly related to the whales.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. We'll now go to Mr. Cormier for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you. Just to go back to my last question that I didn't had a chance to finish, I just want to clarify, Mr. Mess or Mr. Wright, I think you said the planning or the design will be 23, 24 for the new vessel. When can we see the first vessel in operation? I know it's hard for you to say, but just an approximate date. What will be the date that the time that we can have this first vessel in operation?
Yes, the plan right now is to see those vessels in the late 2020s, and by late 2020s, I would mean 2028, 2029 is the current schedule.
Okay.
When we hope to see those vessels. And to answer your previous question about draft, the design draft that we have right now on those is 3.65 meters internally. We'll see how industry can do with that, but that's the type of draft we're looking at for these vessels.
Okay, perfect. That was my second question about the depth, so you answer it. The thickness of the ice, you said, will those vessels will be able to break more than 16 inches or 40 centimeter of ice? Is that what you said?
They're right now being designed to break a minimum of 40 centimeters of ice.
Okay, perfect.
Or
so
maximum
okay, thank you.
A maximum of around 40 centimeters of ice.
Okay, perfect. So to my colleagues around the table, some of the question I'm asking is because my region is one of the one that we cannot go out earlier because some of the ice is stuck, like I said, in the Bay of Caracat and in the Bay of Chipagan. So my question for Mr. Mess, I think, or for Mr. Naba, each year since the last 3 years, like I said, thank you for all the effort that we're putting in place for the ice breaking issue that we are having. But each year we run like dogs, like chasing their tail, because some of those contracts with third party are not signed appropriately or are not done, or there's a lot of issue when it comes to the third party agreement that we have with some of those companies. Can you tell this committee if those contracts with third party, whether it's Groupe Océan for next year, for example, and with Eco Technology, with the frog that we call it here, can you tell us that those contracts are signed, done, so that those companies can go out early next season if we have a ice situation that will be, depending of the season. Sometimes we have ice, sometimes we don't have ice. But can you guarantee us that those contracts are signed as we speak?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. That's my area of responsibility is to deliver the ships and the programs, including the third parties agreements. Those agreements are in order right now. They're getting just finalized, negotiated at the regional levels. They will be in place in time for the fishing season, both in Shippagan and Caracat and the other ports and harbors.
Okay. Regarding the overcraft, like you said, we have, I think, one overcraft for the region. And of course, the priority goes to, places like Restigouche when the river overflow. And of course, this needs to be done, in an urgent matter. But we all know that even if the channel are, getting worked on with some of those third-party agreements, we need also the overcraft to come and open and clear some of these ice before the fishermen can go out safely to sea. So how can we say that we want to go out early when I think it's clear that we don't have the tool in front of us, even if we're making all the effort. Yes, we have the tool, but if the ice is too thick, Gros Poisson cannot come, for example. If the ice is the water is too shallow, well, your icebreaker that you're using right now cannot come. So what is the other solution, in your opinion, that we can put in place to have an earlier season start for making sure that we don't have entanglement with right whales and that they don't come early in our fishing zone?
Chair, the question is a very good question. Fishermen want to get out in advance of the right whales and then hopefully be able to get back in before the right whales arrive so they don't get entangled in the fishing gear. Part of this is dependent very much on weather and the climate. And so if ice is favorable and we can get in with the cascading resources we do, including the hovercraft, we understand the need to get the fishermen out because of the right whale. So there is pressure upon us also to help address that as a priority. So if we have to move, and we do have two icebreakers in central Canada. One is identified usually for the Retouche River, but it also could be that we have to cascade in another vessel. So we do our best in moving things forward and trying to address it. But I understand fishermen want to get out and get fishing.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. We'll go to Madame Debienne for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the members of the committee, do you think that a dynamic management for the right whale protection and also for the planning of the fisheries in this sector, in the eastern part of Quebec, do you think that this dynamic management, flexible, which puts a lot of demand on your services as a Coast Guard, the knowledge of the local fishermen and fisher people and the intentions of the MPO, DFO rather, recognizing the exceptional efforts that have been made, how can we give hope to the fisher folk that hopefully soon they'll be able to practice safe fishing and at the same time satisfactory to the concerns of our export markets, of course? Would you have any advice to give us?
Mr. Chair, again, it's very difficult to speculate with regards to how to answer your question. In the end, I can say that, we look at every avenue that we can to help get the fishermen out and get the harbor breakouts done. We all know that climate change and the ice is cyclical. We've had 2 or 3 rather mild winters in Atlantic Canada and the Gulf. If we go back to 2014, 2015, there weren't enough icebreakers to be able to help and deal with the ice conditions that we had, which were significant. And so all that we can do is to cascade. We have a zonal approach to icebreaking. And what that zonal approach is I can take assets from central Canada and Atlantic Canada and move them around depending upon where the highest priority is. And so that's really the manner in which Coast Guard is able to address some of the demands that come for icebreaking assistance, whether it be in the Gulf, Atlantic Canada, or in central Canada.
Thank you, Madam Debienne. We'll finish off now with Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Sometimes it comes on and other times it doesn't. Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to ask a little bit about the ongoing adaptiveness required with changes as a result of the climate crisis, and also with changes in sightings and where we're seeing North Atlantic right whales. I can imagine that your role requires a lot of ongoing adaptiveness. I'm wondering if you can share with us what you feel are sort of the 1 to 2 main things that we should know as a committee. I know you had spoken about the importance of having enough vessels, the importance of having enough capacity, the importance of having different types of vessels based on conditions, but what do you think are the 1 to 2 main things that we should know moving forward that you need in your role specific to protecting the North Atlantic right whale and fishers?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I think the first one you've already kind of identified, and that's fleet renewal and getting the fleet and the broad fleet. We're going to have more icebreakers than we currently have. We're going to have more ships than we currently have. That in itself is going to meet the ever-increasing demands of nature, but also in the delivery of our programs. In concert with these new fleet, we've also then begun to look at what we call fleet sustainability initiative. Really is, what about the people that we're going to need for the larger ships, the increased number of ships? What kind of infrastructure are we going to need? What kind of training are we going to need? So this is the next step that Coast Guard is now undertaking so that we can position ourselves for the arrival of the new ships. And I think that's one of the things that is critical. We're going to have more sailors. We're going to need more training at the college. We're going to have different kind of infrastructure. We're going to have different kind of expertise on board our ships to be able to deliver our programs differently. And then there is the modernization of the marine navigation system, and that's the second piece. The whole world is going to digitalization. The whole world is going towards real-time sharing of information and data. That is something that Coast Guard is also leading in concert with our department, and it is a critical piece that we're going to need. New ships in 10 years, or if not sooner, we're going to see autonomous ships. If we don't have a digitized and modernized marine navigation system, there is a real good chance that some of these autonomous ships won't come to Canada. It's important that we position ourselves, and we are beginning to work on that digitalization and modernization and the marine navigation system and the communication with our mariners.
Thank you. That concludes our rounds of questioning for today. I want to thank a big thank you to our 3 witnesses who appeared in our second hour and sharing their knowledge with the committee on this important study. Your time is always valuable, I know, but you're always there to appear when invited. I will remind committee members that on Tuesday we will have one last meeting with our witnesses for the North Atlantic right whale study. We will finish up with half an hour of committee business to provide drafting instructions to the analysts for the report. And just off the record, I guess, for Mr. Morrissey's part, he did mention that I was going to pay back for something on a committee. I subbed in on UMA committee, which he chairs this past week. He wouldn't even let me ask a question. But I forgave him for it quickly.
We won't ask why.
No. Meeting adjourned. Not at all.